I'm Jonathan Green. Welcome to the first edition of Trans Am Tuesday. Now, as you saw there, Trans Am is muscle car racing at its very finest. And that was some action from our first round of the 2020 season, which took place right at the end of February, beginning of March at Sebring. But as you well know, while Trans Am may be one of the fastest growing motorsports in the world, COVID-19 has taken us all down and motorsport has come to a grinding halt. But Trans Am, being what it is, has been very innovative. And we, like so many other motorsports, have taken to the internet, and we have been doing a brand new eSport championship by Pirelli for Trans Am. And we've literally been around the world. We started at Laguna Seca. We've been to Barcelona, Daytona, you name it. But last weekend, for the first time in our 54-year history, we took a step back in time for Trans Am, back to the glory days of the late 60s and early 70s, as we went to California and Riverside International Raceway. Here's some of the action from Riverside. We are back in yesteryear as we reopen Riverside for the first time in 30 years. And that was a lovely overtake. And these two, look at them side by side. Great racing here at Riverside. But it's going to be Edward Savagian. He's going to take the checkered flag here at Riverside. So some great action from yesteryear, if you will, at Riverside, and the E-Championship rolls on, and it really is hotting up nicely. And in a few moments' time, I'll be talking to two of the drivers that took part in that E-Championship. The legend that is Boris Said, one of the great drivers of the United States over the years and currently in our Trans Am Championship and our E-Trans Am Championship. And, of course, our six-time TA champion, Ernie Francis Jr., who's currently third in the E-Trans Am Championship and still vying to see if he can win overall. But first of all, I'd like to turn to our resident historian, JJ O'Malley, to talk a little bit about Riverside. JJ, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good to see you,
Hey, good
everyone.
to see you. JJ, I wanted to talk to you about Riverside because, and why we chose to go back there, because it was a big part of Trans Am history. But Riverside as a track, it was an important time, the late 60s and early 70s, for racing in America. What is so important about Riverside?
Well, Riverside was the place where California's car culture came together and brought in stars from all over the world, stars of Formula One, major sports cars, NASCAR, Indy cars, plus stars of screen. You had Paul Newman catching the racing bug when he did part of the filming for the movie Winning, James Dean, Steve McQueen, and even Elvis Presley did a little movie there. But the uh, focus of sports car racing was the Ford versus Ferrari back in the 65, 66 era, and with the battle for Le Mans. But then that came to Riverside at the end of its inaugural season, 1966, and in the golden years following, it served as the season finale. And there you had not Ford versus Ferrari, it was Ford versus Chevrolet with the Camaros versus Dodge versus the Plymouth Barracudas and even AMC. So Detroit's Big Four were going at it on the same racetrack. And it wasn't a driver championship back then, it was a manufacturer's championship. And that really caught the attention of the motorsports world.
And I think the drivers loved it because it was so fast. Even Ernie Francis Jr. was saying that on the sim, it's very fast. That run up the hill to turn 6, I can imagine it would be a fan favorite and a driver's favorite.
Yes, all the drivers that I talked to were very happy with going there, and it said it's kind of bad that we're not running there anymore. But that was the place where Dan Gurney earned his first factory ride with Ferrari back in 1957 at Riverside, and you got to see guys like Mark Donohue, Pernille Jones, George Fulmer winning races, and even NASCAR, the reigning Cup champion David Pearson won a race in a Mercury Cougar in 1967. The most recent Trans Am race there, though, was 1986, and he had Scott Pruitt started at the back of the pack. He came on, he won his very first of many Trans Am races at Riverside.
You know, and JJ, the other thing is that I think is important about that period is for muscle cars, especially, is that the 50s and 60s, even in America, had been kind of dominated by the European manufacturers, Ferrari and Porsche and so on. So this was a sort of changing of the guard, where Dan Gurney and Carroll Shelby and those likes started bringing the big power engines in, and that's a big part of that Ford versus Ferrari era, I suppose. So it was a pivotal turning point for American motorsport, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And the Ford versus Ferrari was the Ford GT. But in the Trans Am, you got to see the Mustang, which had taken off on the streets, taking on the Camaros, the Plymouth Barracudas, the AMC Javelin. So that was the muscle cars of today were racing then in Trans Am.
Well, thanks, JJ. Great insight. And we'll hear from JJ O'Malley, who is our resident historian in Trans Am. But now I'd like to turn to a driver who's actually driven Riverside back in the day. And in fact, in the late days, it closed in 88, I believe, and they turned it into a shopping mall, sadly, in 92. But a man who competed both at Riverside and is currently competing in our E-Trans series. And he also competed last weekend there on the E-Series, and he'll be back in TA2 later in the year. But his last victory came at VIR last year. Here's Boris Said in action from VIR.
VIR is one of the nicest tracks in the country, so it was a blast. I was just driving as hard as I could. Poncho Weaver built such a great car. It's the best car out there. It's a brand new Trans Am car, and unless the competition gets one of these, they're not going to win many races.
So Boris Said winning at VIR with Poncho Weaver. And Boris, welcome to Trans Am Tuesday. I want to start by saying, what was the experience like in real terms at Riverside? We'll get to the e-racing in a moment, but tell me when and where you raced at the Great Riverside.
Well, it was in 1988. It was actually my first full year in racing, and I was a one-man band pulling my car around. It was a series called the Corvette Challenge, equally prepared Corvettes, and we were a support series to the NASCAR race. So it was a crazy place. I remember, the turn 1 up through turn 6, there's no place like that in the world to date. It's so fast. I remember watching Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt going up through there, and they barely had a wheel on the track. They were mostly going through the dirt. It was just wide open and crazy racing, and it was a lot of fun.
How did it compare? I mean, I know you're not a big sim racer, but it must have been kind of fun to go back there this weekend and see it in all its glory. How well did the gamers do in terms of recreating it?
Well, I think they did well, but like you said, I am not a big sim racer. I suck at it, basically. We have a pretty modest system, but I just, not being able to feel it in my butt and not getting my hair on my arm standing up straight. It's just I think I'm just more old school, but the track looked identical. I mean, the bumps were identical. How slippery turn 6 was identical. I remember that. But it was great to see the old place, and it was a shame they built a shopping mall there. I think it went out of business anyway, but it was, I didn't know how lucky I was to get to race there when I did it, not till later on when look back. And after I raced all these different tracks for the years, I would always look back and say, man, that run up through those S's, that was a wild piece of road.
And for the fans out there who sadly will never see it, what would you compare it to? Is there any other circuit you could say it has bits of, another circuit that everybody's more familiar with?
Well, actually, the last race you just showed in VIR in Virginia, those S's are pretty daunting too in a Trans Am car, a real fast car, but you can't really get any wheels off. There's no room for error. Where Riverside, you felt kind of brave because it was just dirt, so those big stock cars and, our Corvette Challenge cars, they actually didn't do too bad through the dirt, unlike some cars. So There isn't really anything else like it in the world, though. It was a pretty unique place.
Well, Boris, I know you're enjoying Trans Am, the real thing. You have for the last couple of years. Are we going to coax you back into action again this year when we do finally get outside?
I hope so. I retired from full-time racing a few years ago, but, Pancho Weaver builds a great car, and, he's not the most structured guy I've ever seen in the world, but he builds a great car. And if he says he gets a new car finished and you want to come race it, I go, I'll be there in a minute, because it's a great series, race against young guys like Ernie, really talented, fast. It's just a lot of fun to compete in those 800 horsepower cars without all the electronic BS stuff that these new cars have. It's real old school, and it's a lot of fun, and the racing's great.
Yeah, we love having you on board. Well, we won't worry about your E-Trans Am results. Are you getting? Because I know you've got Boris said Jr. helping you out. Is he not guiding you a little bit at least? And I say I mean your son, of course.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, there will always be a Boris said racing in the sim race, whether it's him or me. I mean, a couple of times I might have been on the golf course while he was racing, but we're about the same. I mean, we started the same, and we both pretty much sucked the same. But thank God, he started go-kart racing last year, and he's doing a lot better in a go-kart than he's doing sim racing. We seem to hit everything except the snack bar when we run, so we got to work on it a little bit. But it's a lot of fun. It's a great series, and we try to stay out of the leader's way, but we have a lot of fun running into people, and we get run into a lot, so we laugh about it.
Thanks, Boris. We look forward to seeing you in the real Trans Am Championship, where I'm sure you'll be right at the sharp end again. Now, talking to legends, I want to turn to one of our own, currently here in the E-Championship and the real championship, our 6-time champion, 22-year-old, the one and only Ernie Francis Jr. Classic overtake at Daytona. Brilliant stuff by Ernie Francis Jr. So a little bit of action from both the real championship and, of course, Ernie on the sim. And I guess you're the perfect person to ask, Ernie, what is the big difference and how hard is it to transition from real racing to sim racing?
I think it's definitely a difficult transition. It's a lot easier for younger drivers getting into it. When you're a younger driver, you have a little better eyesight. You can adjust to what you're seeing on the sim better than the older guys when they're driving out there. The biggest difference is you don't have the seat of the pants feel of a race car. You're doing it all based on what you see on the monitors, and it's a lot to take in. You have to be able to look and see what the car's doing, how it's reacting, when it's starting to push, or when it's starting to snap loose on you, and make small corrections based on that.
Now, listen, for those that don't know Ernie's career, but you can see it behind him, look at the championships he's got. Unbelievable. 6 times already a Trans Am champion, starting in 2014. Now they've thrown E-Trans at you, and you're third. You're not going to let us down, are you? You got to go for it. Are you going to beat these two guys?
We're going to try our best. I think Spa should hopefully be a pretty good race for us. I really like that track a lot. Never been there in real life, but have a lot of sim time on that track. And then see what we can do in the last 3 rounds of the series. I think every round that we do, we start getting faster. I'm picking up more pace on the sim. I'm learning what it takes to become a competitive sim racer. I haven't really spent a huge amount of time on sim racing before this. I had one that I used a little bit just for learning new tracks, but never competitively raced on one before.
Well, let me ask you one other question, because talking to most of the drivers, they say the hardest thing is kind of going wheel to wheel in a sim. How hard has it been to get your head around sort of the how close you are, but how close you can be in this racing? Because you are racing very, very tight, especially at Riverside yesterday. So is that the hardest part, is just the spatial awareness?
Yeah, I think it all depends on the simulator that you're using, the screen setup that you have. I found it a lot easier once I had triple screens around me to see where the cars were next to me. Or if you're using like VR, it's a lot easier because you can actually look over and see the car that's by you. I think once you get used to that, and you have to get used to what they call net code, which is like a small bubble around the car, where the internet connection between your car and the other guy's car might not be the same. To if you get too close, it might knock someone off the track. Once you get used to how much room you can have in between somebody, it's not too hard.
Finally, Ernie, obviously you're looking forward to our first round at Mid-Ohio. Well, I say our first round back because we've already had Sebring. But how are you looking for this year in terms of, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit like everybody else, but do you feel confident for another TA championship this year?
Yeah, I think so. It almost feels like a whole new start of the season now, going to Mid-Ohio. It's been so long since the first race at Sebring. But yeah, I think we still have that momentum from our win at Sebring. I think we have a pretty fast car. We're really happy to have our sponsor with us again, One South Florida Wealth Advisors. Really happy to have them on board for hopefully the remainder of the season. They've been pretty happy with performance so far, and especially the delivery on the eRace and Corvette that we're racing out there. But yeah, really excited for Mid-Ohio. We've been fast there in the past, won plenty of races there in Trans Am and World Challenge and even the NASA Nationals and Spec Miatas. So it's a track that I know pretty well, and I think we're going to be pretty competitive.
Well, thanks, Ernie Francis Jr. We look forward to seeing you both in the E-Championship at Spa next weekend. And, of course, when we head in mid-June or late June back to Mid-Ohio for the real thing, where Ernie will be defending his TA title. Right, here on Trans Am Tuesday, we turn our attention now to you, the fans, because that's what's important to us. And we know you've got some questions for our special guest today. So let's get them all back. And our first question, I think I'll throw at JJ O'Malley, a question from Logan in Florida. And he wants to know what is the importance of Mid-Ohio for Trans Am in terms of we're going there first. But, I mean, it's not got the history of Riverside, but it's a very important track, right?
Yes, it is. This could be the 30th visit, the Trans Am to Mid-Ohio, and it goes back all the way to the early years. 1967, Jerry Titus won in a Ford Mustang. You've seen Mark Donohue, Ronnie Bucknam, Parnelli Jones, George Fulmer winning the early races. And when it came back in the mid-'80s, you had guys like Wally Dallenbach, Scott Pruitt, Hans Stuck, Darren Brassfield winning races, and then Gentilozzi, Butch Leisinger winning races in the early 2000s. More recently, Simon Gregg won in 2012 and 2016 in a Corvette. So long history at Mid-Ohio. Look forward to going back there.
Thank you, JJ.
Logan.
Now, we've got a question from Mississippi. Lauren Roberts calling in and asking a question for Boris Said. She's a big fan. And she says she's got a feeling that she's been looking through her history books. You've both raced Spa, because that's where we're going to next in the E-Championship. So you might go better there. But have you raced Spa, and what are your memories?
Yeah, I mean, it was a daunting place. I mean, the elevation doesn't do it justice on TV, and the speed. But that corner Eau Rouge is probably one of the most daunting corners of any racetrack I've ever been to in the world. But I raced there in 1994 in a Callaway Corvette, won my first time, sat in the pole, won the 4-hour BPR endurance race. I also went back there years later testing for BMW and probably had the biggest crash in my career there with a wheel failure in Eau Rouge. So a lot of great memories there, a lot of sore memories there, but it's one of the all-time greatest circuits in the world.
Thanks, Boris. And we've got a question now from one Josh Hurley in California. I recognize the name, but his question is for Ernie Francis Jr., and the question is, what's your sim setup, he says.
I don't think I want to answer that question for Josh.
Fair enough.
I don't need him getting any pointers catching up to me. But no, it's a pretty basic setup. I just have a Fanatec wheel and pedals, triple screen monitor, and then a gaming computer powering it. It's pretty new to me. I've only had it for like a month and a half now, so still getting used to it, but it's a lot of fun.
I got a question for you. How about Spa? It's coming up this weekend. You're third in the championship, only 19 points behind. You had one win at Daytona at home. Can you do it here this weekend?
I think it's possible. I think Spa's a pretty good track. I have a lot of sim time there, racing on Assetto Corsa and iRacing. So I think it should be a pretty strong one. And only time's going to tell. See how fast Josh is, see how fast Tyler is, and I think it should be a great race to the end.
Thanks, Ernie. Thank you, JJ. And thank you, Boris said, for being on the show. Great stuff. Well, thank you to you, the fans, and to all of our guests today, JJ O'Malley, Boris said, and Ernie Francis Jr. Thanks for joining us on Trans Am Tuesday. And I just want to remind you before we go, don't forget to download our app. Also, go to gotransam.com, where we've got links to our Facebook, Twitter, and of course YouTube, where you can see all the videos and so on and so forth. JJ O'Malley's got some great historical pieces there as well. We'll be in action from Spa. That's the next round, round 6 of our E-Championship, coming up this Saturday, this weekend, 3 p.m. Eastern, so look out for that. And of course, we'll be in action at the end of June when we hopefully go back to racing for the real thing at Mid-Ohio. So stay tuned. All the action that you need to do is all on that app. You can find everything you need there. And don't forget, tune in next Tuesday when Trans Am Tuesday continues. From me, Jonathan Green. Until then, bye-bye for now.